All right, Mech Warriors, we're going to jump in with this Battletech vlog exploring the Mech Warrior stats. This idea of gunnery and pilot skills. How well can you shoot and how well can you stay on your feet? And how this potentially affects not only the game, but your choice of mechs. Now, Battletech is also a role-playing game. And sometimes what we'll see are various role-playing aspects of Battletech brought into the tabletop, either just with an agreement with your opponent, with your friends, or kind of with a GM, a game master, playing it. But even if you don't jump into the role-playing, bringing that over to the tabletop, there are ways to pay in battle value for the mech based on your pilot to bump those up. On a side note, I have played in Battletech campaigns where based on the training and based on spending C-bills and stuff, you kind of increase your base stats for a long time. And again, Battletech, the rules are important and I want to follow the rules, but I'm willing to overlook or bend the rules a little bit in the name of tabletop glory, fun, and creating a shareable moment on the table. So what we often play is at the end of the game, as long as the Mech Warrior has not been killed, by the end of the game, you can nominate that Mech Warrior. So it's a mech. You can nominate a mech. MVP. It should be MVM, Most Valuable Mech, or Most Valuable Mech Warrior. But MVP, Most Valuable Player. This mech did something interesting in the game. Maybe it went crazy with death from above. Maybe it scored a headshot. Maybe it lasted till the absolute end of the game. Who knows? But you nominate one, it gets a point. If it has survived 3 battles, you cash in that point, and now it's got a +1 to gunnery or pilot. And we kind of play it from there. And you kind of give the Mech Warrior a name. So a lot of options. But primarily you increase the battle value from this. So what is that stock battle value? Again, Battletech being Battletech, it's kind of whatever you want. Increasing it or decreasing it is going to change the flow of the game. Most games that I'll play in, or a lot of them, it's 4-4 as the base. So let's explore, are you improving your gunnery or your piloting skill? And then, now this is opinion. Of course, this is opinion with some experience. And I'm going to turn it over to you guys, my fellow Battletech enthusiasts and Mech Warriors in the comments. If I'm a light mech, I find gunnery is more important simply because, not always, I shouldn't say simply, not always. I find it more important because I have less weapons to shoot, and I am simplifying things a little bit, less weapons to shoot, but greater mobility, unless it's an Irby, greater mobility to get into position where those 1 or 2 shots might make a difference, especially if it's an LRM pack, especially if it's like a Valkyrie or a Jenner from that perspective, where if I'm going to fire off and push that off, it's a little bit more important to hit than am I going to be jumping around? Am I going to be taking piloting tests and pushing from that perspective? So I find the gunnery a little bit more important. Now, when we jump to heavies and assaults, now we get into an interesting debate, an interesting question. 2 tacticas, both exactly opposite. Do you increase gunnery with the idea of saying, well, look, I've got more weapons, I've got more heat sinks, of course, depending on the mech, firing more shots, especially with redundancy and different weapon profiles, if it's easier for me to hit that starting number and I can keep those modifiers down, that's going to turn that heavy and assault into an absolute beast. An absolute beast. And I would agree with that most of the time. Secondary to that would be, and this is the question I'd ask, do you need to increase gunnery? Do you keep it where it is? Because in theory, if you can keep the modifiers down, you've got enough weapons to work from there. Is it more important to have pilot skill? Because you might be looking to deliver some physical attacks. You might, being in the thick of things, be taking a lot of return shots, and you have to make certain checks to see if you're still standing from that perspective. Look, of course, I'd like both. And if you're playing a campaign, you might say, okay, look, I will bump up gunnery, and then I'll bump up pilot or pilot and gunnery, and you keep the kind of stats equal. But if it's a one-off game and you're paying for battle value, the bump, there's a couple of perspectives. Of course, depending on the mech, if I'm going to upgrade my charger pilot, then I probably want to put it into piloting skills, because I'm going to be running around physical attacks. I'm going to be running around kicking. I'm going to be running around taking all this damage. Like, the primary damage is physical and evasion and terrain, as opposed to firing off a bunch of small lasers. Medium mechs. Well, I kind of see medium mechs as 50-50. I think, generally speaking, though, they gain more with the gunnery, the ability to shoot, because now you're kind of midway between a heavy and a light. You've got some primary weapons, you've got some redundancy, you've got some larger, potentially LRM packs, you've got PPCs, autocannon 10s, things like that. You still might only have one. Like, if I look at the Griffin, fantastic mech, love it, stock LRM 10, you've got that PPC, a slight bump in hitting is going to, or decrease in hitting, I should say, is, depending how you look at the numbers, it's going to make it that much more effective, especially with the LRM. Final question. Dedicated missile boats, longbows, archers, looking at something like a Valkyrie on there, not necessarily a missile boat, but can be utilized. I find the gunnery very, very important. Paying just because I want to hit and connect with that spread, having a better value is going to help me tremendously. Okay, turning it over to you guys. First question, do you play with kind of the stock generic mech warrior in the game? Do you allow yourself or your opponent, or do you say, hey, we've got battle value? Are you allowed to spend battle value to increase that? And if so, do you increase that? And if so, what mechs do you believe, mech weight classes, do you believe benefit from one or the other, or one and the other?